I'm Steve Renette from the University of Pennsylvania, and I will present in this paper my work at the site of Kani Shaie in Iraqi Kurdistan. I first of all would like to start thanking the Iraqi Kurdistan Antiquities Department for all their generous support of letting us work in the area, and especially Kamal Rashid, the director of the Sulaimaniya Antiquities Department. I also need to extend my gratitude to the Portuguese Foundation of Science and Technology, who funded the first season of fieldwork at the site. So let me now go to the site. The site of Kani Shaie is located in the center of the Bazyan Valley. The small valley straddles the road that connects Kirkuk with Sulaymaniyah. The Bazyan Hill Range forms a formidable barrier on this route and may have formed a political and cultural border throughout history. The Bazyan Pass forms the easiest passage and may have been the Babite Pass, used by Ashurnasirpal in 881 BCE when he campaigned against the land of Zamua. The leader of Zamua, Nuradad, had constructed a wall there in an attempt to block the advance of the Assyrian army, an act that would be repeated in 1805 AD by the Kurdish prince Abd al-Rahman Pasha Baban to make a defensive stand against the advancing Ottoman troops. Very little archaeological work has been done in this region. Spicer visited the Bazyan Valley in the 1920s, mentioning the Neo-Assyrian site of Kopala, but the only excavations in the valley were conducted by Bruce Howe and Robert Braidwood at the Epipaleolithic cave site of Paligaura in the 1950s. New archaeological fieldwork to the west and east of the Bazyan Valley is finally providing much-needed archaeological data for the region, while the Kani Shaie Archaeological Project is the only project actively exploring a site within this valley. The site was visited by the French team, led by Christine Kipinski, in 2011, who already noted its high potential for excavation. The entire Bazyan Valley now forms a small part of two major survey projects, which are mapping for the first time large parts of Sulaymaniyah province. That the valley functioned as a border zone was already noted by early European travelers through Kurdistan in the 19th century. They observed that the roads were difficult and muddy, and that there were only few seasonally inhabited settlements. The situation might have been deliberate to deter travelers and armies from crossing the Bazyan range and reaching the Sulaymaniyah area. In the 20th century, the valley contained lush gardens, vineyards, barley fields and cotton plantations, while much of the hills provide good pastures. In recent years, the population of the Bazyan Valley has been growing rapidly, while agriculture and industry is expanding. This is putting increasing pressure on the archaeological record. There are no large dominating sites in the valley, but its archaeological potential lies in its position on the border between Mesopotamia and the Zagros Mountains. While we should not expect to find large urban centers in the Bazyan Valley, archaeological exploration of the region can shed light on the use of a frontier zone by ancient political entities and the integration of this difficult landscape in the interregional interaction networks that shape the ancient world. Case in point is the current work by a French and Kurdish team at the Bazyan Pass itself, which is revealing remains spanning the Sasanian and the Islamic periods. The Neo-Assyrian site of Kopala, not far from the Bazyan Pass, might have been an Assyrian outpost to secure this important pass and the route connecting the Assyrian heartland with the treacherous and difficult to control Zagros region. The site of Kani Shaie is located at the center of the valley, where the roads from two passes through this Bazyan range meet and continue over the Tazluja Pass that leads to Sulaymaniyah and the Zagros Mountains. The site is one of the most conspicuous sites in the region, despite its small size of only 1 hectare, but standing 14 meters tall. Its location provides easy access to 4 different small arable plains, and it has plenty of fresh water provided by a spring and streams. The Pilaspi limestone formation is only a few minutes walk away, supplying basic building material. In other words, Kani Shaie is ideally situated to take full advantage of the locally available resources, to access the local agricultural potential, and to connect with and potentially control the routes that connect the Bazyan Valley with the outside world. In September of 2013, we started phase 1 of our excavation project at Kani Shaie with the goal to establish the basic chronology and stratigraphic sequence of occupation at the site, and to assess its potential for further fieldwork. Phase 1 entails the excavation of 2 step trenches on the north and southern slope of the main mount, and a test trench in the lower extension to the north of the site. Based on surface material, Kani Shaie might have been first occupied during the late Rubaiyid period, and continued in use until the mid-3rd millennium BCE. Few sherds from the upper levels of the site suggest limited occupation at the beginning of the 2nd millennium BCE. after which the site was completely abandoned. At the foot of the mound, there are the remains of a small settlement from the early Islamic period, and maybe also some Parthian era occupation. Next year in May, we will return to complete Phase 1 excavations and start Phase 2, which aims to explore the nature of the settlements at the site through excavation of a horizontal exposure of a part of the mound. During the remainder of this talk, I have chosen to highlight a few remarkable finds that demonstrate the great archaeological potential of Kani Shaie and line out some guiding questions for future seasons of fieldwork. The lowest levels reached so far belong to the later part of the Chalcolithic period, so in the second half of the 4th millennium BCE. In both trenches, 2.5 meters of deposits belonging to this period have been exposed. These can be subdivided in 2 levels. The lower level is still very unclear and needs to be explored further next season, but nevertheless the material is so far identical to the upper one. The upper level consists of almost 2 meters of burnt collapse in between large mud brick walls. Unfortunately, because we were working on the heavily eroded slopes of the mountain only in a small area, it is impossible right now to say more about the architecture. Among the debris, we found burnt bricks of the Riemchen type, typical for the Uruk period, large amounts of animal bones, hundreds of fragments of bevel rim bowls, and several other Uruk period ceramics. Apart from the bevel rim bowls, the most common vessel is a typical conical cup with string-cut base. We found several examples of such cups with a pouring lip, which might indicate an earlier date range. In addition, we found many pieces of red slip nose-lug jars, another marker of southern Uruk assemblage. The limited exposure of excavation does of course not allow any definite conclusions, but the general impression so far is of a southern assemblage with the best parallels in late Chalcolithic 4 levels at other sites. Associated with this material, but unfortunately found out of context, is this clay tablet with seal impressions. The tablet was found in a mixed eroded layer covering the burnt collapse. We can securely assume that it originally came from the burnt collapse, as the tablet itself is fired, and the imagery of the seal impression belongs stylistically to the late Chalcolithic period. The tablet has one circular impression on it, which does not pierce through the tablet, but instead is a distinct mark, presumably representing a quantity. Similar numerical tablets, although most commonly with more than one mark, were found at other sites of late Chalcolithic 4 to 5 date. The discovery of this tablet is highly significant, as it is the first of such discovery in Iraqi Kurdistan, and it demonstrates that this region was as much a part of the Uruk world as northern Mesopotamia. Current models of the Uruk expansion tend to neglect the eastern Zagros region and mountains in favor of the northern Mesopotamia region along the Euphrates and to a lesser extent the Tigris River. This discovery suggests that this might rather be a result of the amount of fieldwork that has taken place in Syria and Turkey, in contrast to the dearth of excavations in the Zagros foothills and mountains. While the seal impression on the tablet fits well stylistically with the known glyptic corpus of the Uruk period, the imagery is highly unusual. We see a man with a horned quadruped sending off a boat with 5 more horned animals and 2 rowers. On the one hand, the large figure pointing upward is a common representation of an overseer with an economic activity, in this case a shipment of animals. On the other hand, usually the economic activities being depicted involve production or storage of goods, while boats are only depicted in religious contexts. The unique iconography of the seal impression suggests that it is depicting an activity typical of the Zagros region. It is tempting to hypothesize that Kani Shaie functioned as a trading post, where animals from the mountains were gathered and sent further west to the lowlands. Not too far away from Kani Shaie, the Lesser Zab River to the north and the Sirwan or the Yala River to the south flow out of the mountains and toward the Mesopotamian plains. Closer to Kani Shaie is the Tauk Chai, which is the main tributary to the Adain River, which ultimately leads to the Tigris. These east-west flowing rivers may have been conduits for shipments of mountain resources to lowland communities. Al-Ghazi has famously predicted exactly such a situation, with small sites with southern Mesopotamian material located at east-west routes leading into the Zagros Mountains. Our work at Kani Shaie aims to further test existing models of the Uruk expansion. So far, only the work at Kodin Tepe has famously yielded a detailed data set in this region for the late 4th millennium. However, it is becoming increasingly clear that the relevant occupation at Godin Tepe belongs to the very end of the Uruk phenomenon. Kani Shaie appears to predate the Godin Tepe enclave significantly, and is therefore crucial for understanding of the dynamics of the eastward expansion of the Uruk network. Our small-scale excavations revealed that the late Chalcolithic settlement came to a violent end by conflagration, resulting in a compact destruction layer 2 meters thick. This offers an exciting opportunity to explore a well-preserved settlement of this period. The transition to the following occupation at the site is at this point unclear, but the settlement and its material culture changed drastically. However, any break in occupation could not have lasted very long, considering that the material covering the late Chalcolithic levels find their best parallels in the transitional centuries at the beginning of the early Bronze Age. The only sign of continuity is in the continued presence of beveled rim bowls and the red-slipped inward curving bowls, possibly related to Moran red-slipped ware, well known from the Mahidasht region further south on the Iranian side of the border. In total, we encountered 2 meters of early Bronze Age occupation, with at least 5 architectural levels, with few classic Ninevite 5 sherds in the upper layers, which are well known from northern Mesopotamia. This suggests that the occupation spans the centuries covered by the early Tigridian 1, 2, and 3 period of the recently developed sequence within the Arcane project. However, the material from Kani Shaie is highly unusual when compared to the best known sites from this period in the Eski-Mosul region to the north, and the Hamrin region to the west, and the Zagros sites to the south. In northern Mesopotamia, a clear development of the Ninevite 5 tradition has been traced along the Tigris River and as far east as the Rania Plain. In the Trans-Tigridian corridor and the western Zagros region, the scarlet ware tradition dominated the material culture. Kani Shaie is unique in that many different types of painted ceramics are found together, in the same layers and contexts. Distinctly local types of bowls with large spirals, painted mostly in black or red, occurred together with bowls that are clearly derived from a much earlier Ubaid type. Other bowls have a decoration that shows affinities with the transitional motifs of the Ninevite 5 tradition, while still others are closely related to geometrical decoration patterns of the poorly known Hassan Ali ware tradition from the area south of Lake Urmia in northwestern Iran. Clearly, Kani Shaie and the Bazyan Valley remain closely connected to distant regions. It is commonly stated that after the end of the Uruk-World interregional interaction strongly diminished. The results from our work at Kani Shaie could challenge such a view and suggest that instead the specific operation in terms of the interaction changed, while communication and exchange continued unabated. Kani Shaie is so far unique for the co-occurrence of so many painted traditions in one settlement. The situation raises many questions that require continued excavations at a larger scale. We often assume that the painted traditions at the beginning of the early Bronze Age contain identity markers. If this is true, then what does the co-occurrence of very different vessels in the same domestic context imply about the people who inhabited Kani Shaie? Are all these vessels imports, and was the Bazyan Valley situated on the border between these different ceramic traditions? The poorly preserved architectural remains in our small excavated area suggest that Kani Shaie at this time was a small agricultural settlement, very similar to the ones well known from the Eski-Mosul region. The site might have continued to serve as a local center for the Bazyan Valley, as attested by the presence of 2 seal impressions suggesting administrative activity. One of these is an impression made directly on the jar. This practice is well attested in the Hamrin region during this period, and at least one other example in the region has recently been found at the site of Bakrawa in the Shahrizor plain. Given the different structure of settlements in the Eski-Mosul and Hamrin regions, it will be interesting to explore whether the settlement itself at Kani Shaie reflects a northern Mesopotamian or a Trans-Tigridian connection. While most projects in Iraqi Kurdistan are making great progress in elucidating the role of the region during the historical periods of the Bronze and Iron Age, our work at Kani Shaie aims to explore an elusive period in the early development of Near Eastern societies, especially in the Zagros region. Surveys in the Shahrizor and Mahidasht plains have reported that they were unable to find good evidence for occupation during the first centuries of the early Bronze Age, even leading to suggestions of a sharp increase in nomadism and a general abandonment of permanently occupied settlements. In this regard, it is of interest to note that surface collection at Kani Shaie failed as well to clearly detect the early Bronze Age occupation, as only very few extremely small fragments of painted sherds were recovered. In addition, Kani Shaie is a very small site and therefore much less likely to be the focus of an archaeological project. As settlements of this period tend to be small and modest in nature, their remains could have suffered disproportionately from erosion or later occupation, while they might be more difficult to detect in surveys that cover large areas and lack a thorough understanding of the distinctly local material culture of this period. We hope that our work at Kani Shaie can start to ameliorate this situation and fill a gap in our knowledge of the long development of Zagros societies. We also hope to demonstrate the potential of the Bazyan Valley as a whole and similar peripheral zones in the region, certainly now that demographic growth and agricultural and industrial expansion is forming a threat, especially for small and ephemeral sites that nonetheless hold crucial evidence that complements what we know from large urban centers. Thank you.